And welcome back to the Garden Guys. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm here with Emily.
Nice to see you again.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm pretty stoked to have you on the show. You're somebody who deals with, disclaimer. There is possible discussion of child abuse, child trauma. If that is something you are not mentally capable of digesting, I would recommend skipping this one at some point. So explain what you do.
So I work full time as a child therapist.
Okay.
I've been doing that for the past 4 years. I've worked with adults and children, but primarily with children.
So what made you getting into being a therapist?
Oh, just the age-old tale, right? You know, everyone had a struggling childhood and went to school just to learn more about myself and to kind of help others who went through similar things to maybe avoid continuing that cycle.
Right. I can imagine as a therapist, that's a lot to take on emotionally, especially when you do it for long periods of time. Like you just said, 4 years. That's a lot. What makes you continue doing it?
The wins.
Yeah.
They're few and far between, but I oversee that entire department. So oversee several child clinicians, and a lot of them are new out of school and are just in the very beginning of that process of finding where those soft spots are emotionally, and it's a lot. You get really shell shocked by the reality of the world.
Yeah.
And not everyone has gone through horrible things, but it's pretty common and it's out there.
Okay. So you're also a mom. Are there things that you have learned in your profession that you feel has given you tools to be a better mom to your children?
Patience.
Yeah.
It's all about patience. Kids don't come with a guidebook. And no two situations are the same.
Right.
Whether it's what you have at home or the children you have at home or the skills you're bringing to the table, it's never the same.
What are some things so I know there's like client, doctor, patient confidentiality and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure how in depth you'll be able to go with this. What are some things that you've taken away, like going into this you never expected would ever be a thing, but now it's kind of integrated into your life where it's like, it's a no-brainer?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing that I take away from it is that common sense is not common. I think there's a lot of assumptions about children or other adults or situations that you would look at it and you would say, well, common sense says you should do this or you should not do something else, but it's not it's not all black and white either. Yeah. So it's that's always the conversation that I have with a lot of parents is, you know, I don't think you expected to be in this situation, and no one is expecting you to know what to do next. And a lot of them are kind of just relieved to hear that.
Yeah.
Because they, just like any other parent, right? You have this internal feeling that I should just naturally know what to do. Like I should just figure it out and I got this and I shouldn't be asking for help and I should just know what the next part is. But common sense is not common. So yeah. That's mostly what I see, and a lot of that disappointment and frustration around being a parent.
I was going to ask you, do you interact with the parents a lot?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
I would imagine that there's a constant stream of communication, like updates of what's going on and how progression is.
Yeah, there should be.
Why do you say there should be? Are there instances where people don't do that?
There are times, and this is just like a general misconception of therapy that's out there. There's times that people think, well, the child is the problem. Here's the kid. Now fix them.
Wow.
And they shouldn't be part of that process. But we can do the most fantastic work, but we're putting them right back into a situation that hasn't changed.
Yeah, it sounds like there's not a lot of support when they go back. That's heartbreaking.
So there should be. And I know with the families that I work with, I'm pretty transparent about what I want from them, so that we can get the best outcomes. They don't always agree.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is a discussion about that, but in the end, the ones that do follow through get the best out of it.
What are some of the things that you communicate with parents that are like they give some pushback on?
Um, the normal things that teenagers go through,
Okay.
I think, is one of the biggest pushbacks. You know, they get upset because their kids want to hang out with their friends, or they get upset because their kids want to date, or they get upset that they just go to school to socialize. And I feel like I'm constantly just reminding people, like, don't you remember what it was like when you were a teenager? Like, that was your world. That is what you wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sometimes reminding them of that, or just developmentally some things that are normal for teenagers to go through that every parent wishes that kids wouldn't go through, but it's a part of life.
Okay.
I think a big part of it right now is, you know, figuring out just personal identities, and sexual identities are a big one right now too. That is new, right? It's not new, but it's new for these parents to be going through.
Yeah.
And they will constantly kind of just, they shouldn't even be thinking about dating. And they're like 17, 18. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah. That's all they can think about.
Well, and biologically speaking, that's all they should be thinking about, right?
Right. That's like when everything gets going and it's they're getting into their peak, going into the 20s and whatnot. What are some tools that you recommend to parents to kind of cut the umbilical cord, I guess?
I think the biggest one is just remembering what it was like when you were a teenager.
Yeah.
I think people get really stuck in the not my kids, not, you know, not in this house.
Yeah.
Sort of like perfect world situation, but that's not possible for every place. Communication. I would have a lot of those conversations with your kids way early on. I mean, my kids, I have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, and we've talked about all the things that you could possibly like, for the most part, and it's age appropriate, but we've talked about good touch, bad touch. We've talked about different sexualities. We've talked about you know, bullying and communication, and just opening that door, I think is the biggest part of it. It's just normalizing the conversation.
So a lot of parents, so I feel like as a whole, we are coming out of the, we can't talk to our parents. Our parents make us feel bad. We get yelled at. We get shut down, all those kinds of things. And now parents are wanting to step up with their kids in this generation and be more open with them. But a lot of them don't know how to start that. So what is a tip that you have?
Getting a third opinion, getting a third person in the situation.
Okay.
You know, and I really advocate for everyone to be in therapy. Just in my opinion, I think everybody should be in therapy, and I'm sure that's just an occupational thing. But just to have that third person to talk to. I had a family that I talked to even just earlier this week, that the mom admitted, like, I want more for my kids, and I just don't know how to do it. And we had the conversation of, like, where does that come from? And like you said, it's generational, and there's a solid generation there that's now parenting that comes from, like, the walk it off generation. That's what I like to call them, because we tried to reach out and our parents didn't want to hear it. They just told us to suck it up and move on. Right. And we, you know, as parents in our age are trying to get past that, but we just don't know how. And a lot of people don't know how. And again, there's no book.
Right.
I tell everyone, don't Google it. Like, don't Google doctor yourself. Like, that's not great advice.
Literally anybody can be posting on the internet.
Yeah. And it's terrible. So it's going and talking to someone so that you can have, you know, some feedback that's specific for your situation.
That's a good way to put that, specific for your situation. A lot of people have this blanket view of therapy of either super crazy people go or they're going to go in there and just have to defend themselves the whole time.
Yeah. And that's generally the first step. Even with, like, younger kids that it is normalized, like talking about mental health and getting help. They do come in, and most of the time they are defensive. The first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I don't need this. I'm not crazy. I don't need this. But after they kind of settle in a little bit, like they start to see the benefits of it, and they kind of ease into it. And that's why I say, like, everybody could use it. Everybody could maybe have a little bit of an adjustment.
So I can't remember what you said verbatim, but you kind of said tailored towards your specific needs. So it's not one size fits all.
No.
What would you say the average is before somebody finds the therapist that they are most comfortable working with?
Like when they start to see a therapist?
Yeah, because someone might go see a therapist for a week or two. They might try it for a month or so, and then they recognize, like, we're really just not meshing personality-wise.
I mean, I don't want to sound braggy, but I very rarely come across people who I don't jive with.
I believe that.
It would surprise you. It's mostly parents who sometimes don't like me, but it's for that same reason. There's that defensive, like, aversion to the whole process, that they don't like it. Like, they come in thinking, like, I'm going to be the hammer, I'm going to lay down the law, and they're going to be the ones that's right. And it's not really about right or wrong, but they think, like, this is my person that's going to be on my side, and I'm not that. And they don't like that.
Hit them with the old 180.
Yeah, they come in and they're like, what you're doing is wrong. And I'm like, oh, hold on.
Right. Let's back up a little bit and let's reevaluate the situation.
Yeah. And then they go, what do you mean? So it's usually like parents that have to, like, find, and that sounds awful, because it's the same thing as, like, Googling problems. Like, you're looking until something agrees with you.
Yeah.
But I wholeheartedly think you try therapy until you find someone that you can talk to, that you feel comfortable talking to. I work with a lot of my clinicians on that. Like, how can they meet their patients where they're at?
Yeah.
Because some of them have no idea what these kids are talking about.
Right.
I think, and I joke with my boss often that my TikTok time should be, like, I should be able to bill for that, because that's purely research for work. And if I didn't know half of the terms that are out there, like, I would be lacking. So
you really go to TikTok for research?
No.
Okay. I was say, no way. Like, what are you learning?
No, it's not. But it has. I kid you not. There's been a handful of times that, like, they'll, like, these kids, they're just trying to prove how smart they are, and they'll say some term or whatever, and I'll go, oh no, I know that one. And there's always, like, it's a little bit of, oh.
Yeah. From you or them?
From them.
Yeah.
I get excited because I'm like, yeah, like, maybe I'm cool for once. Yeah. I'm not. They've told me.
Yeah.
We have a safe space. They can burn me in a safe space.
I love that. You're giving them room to be brash.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I tell them all the time, because sometimes they hesitate to really be themselves. I go, you're fine. Like, talk to me however you want to talk to me. Just, like, don't harm me.
Right.
Like, I don't even care if you're upset and you start cursing or anything like that. Like, that's fine. Like, you can describe things in however much detail you want to. Like, nothing's gonna upset me.
So in saying you can tell me in as much detail as you want to, how do you not absorb all of that?
I do a lot of work on myself to be able to separate the two.
Yeah.
And I don't know what part of that is, personal experience or work experience, because I have a secondary job where I get called to crisis situations.
Oh, wow.
So this is specifically hospital calls. So this is after domestic violence situations, after sexual assaults. And I've been doing that close to 6 years.
Oh, wow.
So
I'm going to interrupt you before you keep going. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of women out there, specifically on the internet, who are just loud on the internet and think that they're doing something to help women. And you're actually out here doing something to help women. And then as a human being, I appreciate you dedicating your time to do that.
Yeah. Someone has to.
Right.
And it's not a pretty job.
I believe that.
And it's not an easy job, and it's not for the faint of heart, but there is, and it sounds awful, there is a little bit of that desensitizing to the situation. And I think over the years, I've heard and seen so many things that I've kind of normalized it a bit.
Okay.
But it doesn't take the weight away from it.
Yeah.
And it's still humanizing the situation and just knowing like this is more common than you think. And statistically, like it's there. It's frequent. People don't talk about it, but it's frequent.
You meaning domestic violence?
Well, domestic violence, sexual
or just people
assaults,
being in crisis?
Crisis, mental health, like all of it. Like the numbers are up and up. Like I think it's, doubled or tripled over the years. Mm-hmm. And it's, I don't know where it comes from. Yeah. It's a topic that I wish more people talked about. Mm-hmm. And not just from like that crisis intervention. So my academic background is social work. So it's not just looking at the work to do after crisis has happened, after we're already in the thick of it. It's what can we do as far as prevention and education beforehand? Just sort of like that upstream sort of work. You know what I mean? Because downstream, we're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So, like I said, so I advocate for those conversations at home, and I talk to my kids about it.
Yeah.
even talking about, and I've been talking to my daughter about sexual assault and appropriateness of, different topics and things like that since she's probably like 4 or 5.
Yeah. We've already started having those conversations too, and our kids are still under the age of 10. So.
Yeah, no, it's important to have those conversations because then she wouldn't feel strange about talking to me if something happened.
Right. And it's also not off the radar. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be a massive shock to the system if it did happen to be like, this is what mommy told me about.
Right. So I've already set up that framework of this is what the conversation looks like. Mm-hmm. This is who I can talk to. Because anyone who has any bad intentions with you is going to take advantage of you not knowing what's right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing for any sort of domestic violence or sexual assaults.
Yeah. So are you okay with talking on the subject of DV?
Mm-hmm.
So all over the internet, there are massive umbrella terms for everything now. Somebody gets offended by an opinion and they call that person a narcissist. Mm-hmm. So I feel like DV has kind of spread itself really thin in the way that people are using it. And now really anything, people just throw that label onto it. So what are some things that you would outline as being like true domestic violence?
So there is the school of thought that violence is only physical.
Right.
And it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I think over the last couple decades, do they really look at the effects of physical abuse as well as psychological abuse or financial abuse and all of those things. And there's a really wonderful graphic called the power and control wheel. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it kind of outlines the different areas that someone who is perpetrating any sort of domestic violence is going to kind of take hold of the situation and hold on to the situation. And to me, that would be abuse. Anything that robs you of your power in a situation where it should be equal, to me, feels like an abuse of power.
I agree with that. I think that was a very good way to answer that question. I have not heard of that. You said it was
power
a
and
wheel?
control wheel. Yeah. So there's, I like it too because it's got like the power and control is like all the negative things, and then it has equality wheel, I think is the good one. So it's like red flags versus green flags.
Okay.
So it's a great thing that I go over with a lot of adults. I go over it with teenagers too when they're going through different situations because you'd be surprised how early
I'm
this
actually not
starts.
surprised. I'm not. Mm-hmm. I think, well, that was actually going to lead me into a question that I had for later on, but now we're here. There are some really like overbearing parents and specifically mothers who get like super jealous of teenagers growing up and finding people to fulfill needs that they once only got from the parents or from the mother specifically. So would that be a factor playing into that control power dynamic?
Possibly. I mean, anyone who's looking to gain control over a situation is looking for how can they make someone depend on them.
And that could be for a plethora of reasons, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the most common ones that you see?
Love and attention.
Okay.
So there's a lot of households who feel like, I buy you food, I buy your clothes, I make sure that you get to school, and that's it. And there is that element of being a parent is connecting with your children as a human,
Right.
like as another human. And if you don't, someone will fill that need.
Yeah. And it could be in a nefarious way to do it too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's crazy to think about. Is that a commonplace thing that you see with some of the children that you speak to, like absent parents?
Mm-hmm. Or parents who are much more on the authoritarian. I think I'm saying that right. Authoritarian
That
side.
sounds right.
It's in there. Who they set the rules. They are the parents. There's this very clear, like, I'm the adult. I'm the person who has control over this household, because that's kind of what they grew up in. So, they don't know how to express their feelings. They don't know how to connect with another person emotionally, and kids pick up on that. They need that. They need that human connection.
How much does technology play into all of that?
I would say the biggest part of it is just access to children.
Okay, you mean like adult access to children, or
Other
children having
kids,
access?
children's access to information. There's a lot of comparing between people, especially in social media.
Yeah.
Teenagers who see these families who are always going on trips together, or they have brunches every weekend, things like that, and then they feel that.
Of that, of children seeing other families being happy. Oh, that fucked me up.
So it kind of further perpetuates, well, why isn't my family like that? Why don't I have that support? Where is that love for me? And then something's going to fill that, whether it's another person or it's, engaging in risky teenage things,
right.
Or maybe being really loose with boundaries because now they're getting attention, or substance use kind of fills in and numbs a lot of that too.
Do you see a lot of kids using substances?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Even around here.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you say like a vast majority? A few? Has it increased over the years?
So, and everyone has different opinions on it, but it has, as far as when we're classifying substance use, the common ones tend to be like THC and alcohol. It would surprise you probably, but there's other substances past that are also pretty common around here.
Wow. Are we talking like hardcore?
I had one kind of recently who was experimenting with fentanyl, like, which is pretty extreme. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because.
Oh my gosh. And this is somebody under 18? Mm-hmm. That's terrifying to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, and a lot of it, with the THC use, the alcohol use, it could very well, and it's increasing in severity, and it's scary. A lot of the THC use is, and I say it in such a a minimizing way, but it is important to know. It affects you developmentally.
Right.
So no matter what, and I explain this to all families, all kids, it doesn't matter what you're putting in your body or withholding from your body. It could be vitamin C. You know what I mean? It's going to affect the way that you develop, and you're not fully developed. The THC use is on the rise because it is medically approved now, like legally. Right. So it's in the houses. And the parents have normalized it, and they're like, well, I use it, so it should be fine. And some of them are a little bit more permissive about their kids using it. And then it escalates from there.
Isn't that like a federal crime?
Absolutely is.
Oh my
I
gosh.
explain that too. And those are the times that, I have to have those conversations of that's illegal. Like you can't provide substances to your child. And it surprises them somehow.
Oh, they're actually shocked.
Yes.
You mean I can't smoke a joint with my son who's 14?
Yes. I have parents who, at least they're doing it under my roof. They're going to try it. At least they're doing it under my roof, and they will provide alcohol, and they will do these other things. And I go, that is illegal.
Yeah.
Also not right. Like, and that's the conversation.
Right. Morally, like, I could understand a small glass of wine at dinner when they turn 16 years old.
Also illegal, but
It is illegal. In America, that is illegal.
Right.
Culturally, though, it's a worldly thing, right? 14 and 15-year-olds getting absolutely blasted because, well, they're going to do it anyway. Oh, that's some poor parenting right there.
So, and I don't know if that's just like an overcorrection, right? So earlier we were talking about the parents who just forget that kids are kids and they're going through a tough time and they're developing and they're growing. And then there's the complete opposite end of that spectrum where parents are like, well, kids will be kids and they're
Let them
super
live
permissive.
life.
Yeah. And we need to be somewhere in the middle there.
Would you say those parents are people pleasers because they want their child to be happy and don't want to do things that could in turn upset the child?
Could be. I mean, those are the parents that tend to be more friend than parent.
Okay.
And they're like, well, I'll just be the cool, like, at least they talk to me about these things.
Right.
At least they're coming to me about them. And I go, well.
Right, but they're coming to you and Jessica and Stacy, and they talk to Kevin too, and your opinion's probably the least important out of all of them.
Right.
So there's so much going on in my mind. What is some of the fallout that could happen from a parent who is too permissive?
Legal repercussions, I think, is the big one. Another big part of it is kids need structure. They need parents. They need those years of figuring out what's right or wrong.
Right.
And if you're too permissive and you're not really showing them that, when they get out into the world where the law gets involved, right? So at home, parents are the law. And if they're too permissive, they go out into the world and they think, well, it's okay. I can skirt this line, or there's a gray area. And there's definitely a lot of those things that you can't do that with. And these kids don't, and it sounds awful in the way that our society is, but they don't fit into being a productive member of the society because they think they're more important. They can do whatever they want.
Have you told a parent that?
Mm-hmm.
How do they react?
Mad.
I believe that.
They're generally pretty mad. That's one of the things that, I challenge them on, and they go, well, yeah, like I let them, like these kids that have phones super young, or, sticking to their morals. Let's say
Sticking to their morals. Good.
So, when parents aren't really sticking to that moral, and they come to me and I say, well, that's not right. You can't do that for X, Y, Z reason. And sometimes it's a physical reason. Sometimes it's a literal law they're breaking, and they go, oh, but it's my house.
So taken aback.
Yeah. They were so shocked. And I go, like, I don't know how no one has caught you or told you this up to this point, but you can't just do that.
That's wild.